judge the quality of my commentary by the substance of what I'm saying. Ronald Reagan was routinely criticized for being a lightweight. So, what are my qualifications to speak to policy, political, and philosophical issues? This is Steve Gibson reporting. Some of you have commented somewhat favorably, somewhat just basically asking some questions, and I welcome all of that as to what is my background? What are my qualifications to speak to the weighty issues on a daily basis that I'm speaking to? Some have said that I am a relatively new podcaster and have questioned whether or not that level of length of time of podcasting provides me with the qualifications to speak to these issues. Well, I'm going to get to what my qualifications are in a moment. My first response, however, would be judge the quality of my commentary by the substance of what I'm saying. If you disagree substantively with what I'm saying, that's fine, that's fantastic. I'm more than happy to engage in the discussion. If you agree with what I'm saying and question whether or not I have authority to say it, you can still agree on the basis that what I'm saying appears to be correct. More often than not, having an elongated resume is not indicative of whether or not the policy position or the philosophical position is good, right, bad, or wrong. There are plenty of folks that are politicians today that have a resume a mile long and articulate horrible policy positions. Some of them may not be thinking it through. Some of them actually may be corrupt. The fact that you have potentially a fabulous resume doesn't necessarily indicate that you're staking out the right position. I would maintain that graduating from a liberal school, a Harvard or a Yale, does not necessarily indicate that you have the right philosophical or policy position framework that you've been exposed to. That, again, doesn't mean that they didn't potentially gain a decent education or exposure to education. It merely means that the fact that they may have come from a Harvard or Yale doesn't mean that that's any better than a Stanford or University of Chicago or any other institution. It does denote potentially a level of success that they've had academically, or maybe the fact that they may have come from relative wealth and had some advantages in life, but that does not define the merits of their policy positions. Ronald Reagan was routinely criticized for being a lightweight. He was an actor and didn't have exactly a Harvard degree under his belt. And yet he's been demonstrated at a fundamental policy position level as being one of our more successful presidents. Jimmy Carter was known to be intellectually superior to other presidents, but he tended to micromanage and get mired in certain details of the office and lost the big picture more often than not. There's no question that history has recorded Jimmy Carter as a relative failure as a president, despite potentially having a better IQ or better background than other presidents. Charlie Kirk was generally deemed to be someone that did not bring weighty intellectual credentials to his conversation, and yet he was able to articulate policies and bring the discussion of substantive issues to campuses across the country, debating professors and others. He was obviously self-taught in many respects, such as Abraham Lincoln, and the wealth of knowledge that he brought to the table was not defined by whether he had a PhD or a JD or any other high-level degree from a otherwise well-known institution. So, as I'm going to articulate to you some of my background, I would rather you not focus on those aspects of my history, but rather focus on whether or not I am debating the issues in a way that advances the discussion. That is the hope of what I'm doing here. Are we going to advance the discussion? Are we going to be looking at new policies, new procedures, new philosophies that we ought to be looking at and are often ignored by our current politicians? So, back to my background. I spent 7 years in intensive academic debate through high school and college. That is, without question, some of the best education that I've ever undertaken. When I say debate, I'm not talking about two people standing up for a little bit of time in slow fashion talking about a variety of issues. Forensic academic debate, and I would implore you to look at some of the videos of this type of forensic debate that takes place in high schools and colleges across the country, is a form of activity where you have to bring to the fore a tremendous amount of evidence. And you have to, if you're going to be successful, speak at a relatively high rate, because if you speak clearly and quickly, the other side has to respond to all of your arguments. If they fail to respond to one of your arguments, then you are deemed to effectively win that argument. The speed and rate is comparable to something along the following lines. Observation number one, you must hear on the conservative side, a public policy demands it. That's the speed at which you're going to speak for 8 to 10 minutes in one of these debates. So I, back in the old days, would carry around with my teammate 8 full big Oxbox briefcases full of evidence and be prepared to talk about a wide array of public policy issues, whether they be military, whether they be education, climate, all kinds of different issues of a substantial national and international level of interest. Did that for 7 years, and then I went off to my 4th year of undergrad in Japan. And while in Japan, at a university there, I studied Japanese management and economics, Asian history, and a wide array of eye-opening topics that expanded the scope of analysis beyond that which I just merely learned in the United States educational institutions. I graduated cum laude in political science with a heavy emphasis on philosophy and economics. Then I went to law school and also graduated cum laude and also excelled with substantial awards. I also, by the way, during my debate career, was often awarded substantial accolades with respect to the competitions that I was engaged in, winning some tournaments, winning first speaker awards, and the like. After law school, I practiced law and also established businesses over multiple decades of career activity. Establishing businesses was a critical experience that taught me some more of the fundamentals of how practical economics works, what regulations do to businesses, what are taxation issues, what are the struggles that employers must face in meeting payroll every month or every 2 weeks. These are substantial experiences that inform me with respect to certain policy positions. Of course, all during the time period I continued to study and analyze issues, absorbing news from reputable news sources, newspapers, and not ignoring whether it be liberal news sources, conservative news sources, international news sources, and the like. Continue to be a student of politics and history along the way. So while there are others that may argue that they have greater qualifications when it comes to political science, when it comes to economics, law, and comparable disciplines, I think that my record stacks up with just about anybody out there. But that's not the point. The point is continue to comment, to continue to engage me on what the policy position is. Let's not fight the resume battle, but I will ask that you like, subscribe, and follow so that I can continue to have this conversation with you.